Om Tava Kathamritam Tapta Jivanam Kavibidiritam Kalmashapaham Shravanamangalam Srimadattatam Bhuviganantiye Bhurida Janaha. Welcome, good evening everyone. Today's our 10th class on the Gospel. Going chronologically, and we've been discussing M's third visit to Sri Ramakrishna for quite a while now, going slowly but I hope not boringly through the text. And today we will conclude his third visit to Sri Ramakrishna on really a high note, I hope. The topic is, I've given the title for today's class as Sri Ramakrishna's Music-Induced Samadhi. And I hope we'll see fairly soon why I call it that. So, first of all, last time, in our last class, we ended with a really interesting lesson in logic. M started teaching him about inferences and stuff like that, inductive inference versus deductive inference. And Sri Ramakrishna, after listening to a bit of it, gets kind of, he's like, thanks, but no thanks. And it ends on that note. And then, just after that, let me read. Oh, before I read. As usual, in the Bangla, there's a new chapter heading, which is omitted from the English translation, Nikhilanji's translation. So I'm going to mention it, and I think it's highly significant. It's the 8th chapter, Ashtam Parichad. And as usual, he gives an epigraph. This time again from the Bhagavad Gita. Shruti vipratipanna te yada sthasyati nischala tada nischala samadhavachala buddhihi tada yogam avapsisi. 2.53. The translation would be roughly, when your buddhi, when your intelligence is bewildered, which is bewildered by Shruti, by scripture, will stand unmoving, nischala, and stable, achala, in samadhi, then you will attain to yoga. Okay, this is the epigraph. Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, shloka 53. Now, this is obviously a kind of anticipation of the fact that Sri Ramakrishna is about to go into samadhi after listening to a song. We're going to find that very soon as we read the passage. But I think there's even more, I think we can read more into it. I'm not saying that this is a correct interpretation. I'm saying it's one possible interpretation. Does anyone know? Gita quiz. What's the immediately following shloka? It's a tough question. It's a tough question. I'm going to give you a hint if nobody is immediately able to answer this question. The hint is Arjuna asks a question. Now, at least one of you should know this. It's the first question asked by Arjuna in the entire text, chapter 2. He only asks one question. And then Bhagavan Krishna gives a very long answer. What is it? You don't know? Sthita prajnasya ka bhasha samadhisthasya keshava sthita dihi kim prabhasheta kim asita vrajeta kim. I think the context is really important. So let me give you a little bit of background on this Gita. Okay. In this verse, Krishna is telling Arjuna, you will attain to yoga when your buddhi remains firmly stationed in the state of samadhi. I find it highly significant that in the next verse, Arjuna asks a question directly relating to this person who is in the state of samadhi. What's the question? Arjuna, like a normal person, yeah, what? Yeah, and they're external characteristics. I mean, how does the person in samadhi speak? How does he walk? How does he sit? And so on and so forth, right? Remember, Arjuna is a kind of every man, every woman type of, so he's asking questions that might occur to us. The moment that Krishna is explaining the state of samadhi, or at least mentioning the state of samadhi, Arjuna gets curious. Well, what does that look like, somebody who's in the state of samadhi? What's even more interesting is, for the remainder of the chapter, Krishna gives a long answer to Arjuna's question, but he doesn't explain a single external characteristic of the person in samadhi. everything he describes, all the characteristics of somebody in Samadhi are all internal states. Every single one of them. The first verse, Prajahati yada kaman sarvan patmanogatan atmanyevatmana tushtasthita prajnasadochate. When one has completely eliminated all the desires from one's heart, then one rests in oneself, and one can be considered to be a person of steady wisdom, of steady buddhi, a person in samadhi, and so on and so forth. Now, I wonder whether there's a kind of ironic reference to this verse, partly because I almost was hoping that he would have used as the epigraph Arjuna's question. How does a person in samadhi talk? How does he sit? Because then this whole section could be seen as a kind of alternative answer to Arjuna's question. Because instead of Krishna giving all external characteristics, all internal characteristics, what you'll find in this section is that M is carefully scrutinizing and observing Sri Ramakrishna's external characteristics while in the state of samadhi. Okay, so all that I think is sort of possibly implied in this epigraph. Even if it's not, I think it's still important to keep in mind that this is the epigraph chosen by the author of this text to frame this entire section. Next point, he gives, after this chapter title, he also gives it, this section, this concluding part of M's third visit to Sri Ramakrishna, a section title, and that's also significant, Samadhi Mundire. It's a very beautiful metaphor. Mandir, you're sitting right now in a mandir, in a temple. Samadhi Mundire. Mundire means in a temple. Samadhi Mundire, Samadhi Mandire. In the Samadhi temple. What a beautiful metaphor. We're sitting here physically in a temple. Sri Ramakrishna is in the temple of the highest state of Samadhi. Okay. So with all that, which is not mentioned in the translation, now let's read from Nikhilanji's translation. When the meeting broke up, the devotees sauntered in the temple garden. M went in the direction of the Panchavati. It was about 5 o'clock in the afternoon. After a while, he returned to the master's room. There, on the small north veranda, he witnessed an amazing sight. Sri Ramakrishna was standing still, surrounded by a few devotees, and Narendra was singing. Narendra was future Swami Vivekananda, with a beautiful voice. M had never heard anyone except the master sing so sweetly. When he looked at Sri Ramakrishna, he was struck with wonder, for the master stood motionless, with eyes transfixed. He seemed not even to breathe. A devotee told M that the master was in samadhi. M had never before seen or heard of such a thing. Silent with wonder, he thought, is it possible for a man to be so oblivious of the outer world in the consciousness of God? How deep his faith and devotion must be to bring about such a state. I'm going to pause here. In the very next sentence, the song starts, Narendra starts singing. But before that, I just wanted to mention a few things here. One thing I want to say about this entire section is that I think it's one of the most untranslatable sections of the entire gospel, for several reasons. One reason is that it centers on a particular song, and he gives every single lyric in that song, none of which is really translatable properly, because it's a song, and no song in any language is properly translatable into any other language. Because what happens when you translate a song from one language to another? The rhyme scheme is lost, the tune is gone. We'll talk about the song later, but about and why I think that it's so impossible, really, to translate. But the other reason is, for the remainder of this section, after M gives the lyrics and explains Sri Ramakrishna's state of different external characteristics, the state of samadhi that he's in, he does something incredible, which is, I really think this section is a literary masterpiece. Because what he does is he's showing point by point how Sri Ramakrishna, while listening to the song, is undergoing the very states and experiences sort of described in the song itself. He becomes completely identified with the consciousness of the singer. And he's constantly using these keywords borrowed from the lyrics of the song, obviously in Bengali, and saying that Sri Ramakrishna is exhibiting those same characteristics, you see. But that one-to-one mapping is almost impossible in English, as we'll see. Okay. Now, I wanted to mention a couple. In general, I think Nikhilanji's he's translated as well as he could have. And I think there are just a couple places where I would respectfully disagree with him. So, for instance, Master Ashia Gan Shunitechen. So, Master is listening to Naren singing. Gan Shunia Akrishta Hoya Rohilen. This entire sentence is omitted. So in Nikhilanji's translation, I'll read you what he says. Sri Ramakrishna was standing still, surrounded by a few devotees, and Narendra was singing. And then the next sentence in the Bengali is omitted. Gan shunya akrishta hoya rohilen. As he listened to this song, M was as if entranced by the song. I mean, he's mesmerized. And then Nikhilanji continues the translation. The other very small thing that I wanted to point out, the translation says, the master stood motionless with eyes transfixed. What do you understand when you hear eyes transfixed?
Gaze.
Yeah, the gaze is fixed, right? That's not wrong, but the literal Bengali is chokhut pata poritechena. His eyelids, I mean, he wasn't blinking at all. So the eyelids were not closing at all. And I think that's more significant in a way. I mean, transfixed doesn't quite capture that, I think.
I also think that the latter doesn't necessarily imply an object, whereas the former does.
What's the latter?
To just say somebody was standing with their eyes unblinking does not necessarily imply an object. Whereas to say that somebody's eyes were transfixed implies...
Yeah, it usually implies that you're staring at something, right? Yeah. Good. So that supports my point. Thank you for this supporting. So yeah, I think transfixed is not perfect here. I think that with his eyelids, I mean, it's difficult to translate in an elegant way, but literally it means he was not blinking at all, just like this. And that also highlights the fact that it's a very unusual state, which, I mean, most human beings, they blink, right? That's just natural. So that means he's lost external consciousness. That's the first sign that Sri Ramakrishna has lost external consciousness, the fact that he's not blinking at all. Okay. Now, let's continue. And I'm going to just finish this section, and then we'll talk about it at length. Narendra was singing. Meditate, O my mind, on the Lord Hari, the stainless one, pure spirit through and through. How peerless is the light that in him shines. How soul-bewitching is his wondrous form. How dear is he to all his devotees. Ever more beauteous in fresh blossoming love that shames the splendor of a million moons. Like lightning gleams the glory of his form, raising erect the hair for very joy. The master shuddered when this last line was sung. His hair stood on end, and tears of joy streamed down his cheeks. Now and then his lips parted in a smile. Was he seeing the peerless beauty of God that shames the splendor of a million moons? Was this the vision of God, the essence of spirit? How much austerity and discipline, how much faith and devotion must be necessary for such a vision? The song went on. Worship his feet in the lotus of your heart, with mind serene and eyes made radiant with heavenly love. Behold that matchless sight. Again, that bewitching smile. The body motionless as before, the eyes half shut, as if beholding a strange inner vision. The song drew to a close. Narendra sang the last lines. Caught in the spell of his love's ecstasy, immerse yourself forevermore, O mind, in him who is pure knowledge and pure bliss. The sight of the Samadhi and the divine bliss he had witnessed, left an indelible impression on M's mind. He returned home deeply moved. Now and then he could hear within himself the echo of those soul-intoxicating lines. Immerse yourself forevermore, O mind, in him who is pure knowledge and pure bliss. Okay, so a little background on this wonderful song. Anyone know the composer? This is also a very difficult question unless you... Troilokanath Shannal. He was a follower of Keshab Chandra Shen's Brahma Samaj, one of the many sects of the Brahma Samaj. Now, officially, the Brahma Samaj believes that God is Saguna but Nirakara. Saguna means with attributes, personal, omniscient, omnipotent, and so on, all-loving. But Nirakara, which means formless. They don't believe in forms of God. They're not supposed to, at least officially. But what's interesting is, Keshab, at least partly under the influence of Sri Ramakrishna himself, becomes more sympathetic toward the forms of God. And one thing that's striking about this song, well, let me ask you. You heard the song, in translation at least. Is it describing God with form or without form?
Behold the matchless form.
Yeah. I mean, again and again it's emphasizing the bewitching form of God. Mohana Murati. We'll get to the Bengali a little bit at least. So that struck me when I first read it, that this is supposed to be composed by a Brahmo, which means somebody who believes in the formless God, and the whole song is about the stunning beauty of the form of God. I think one needs to do research on this to really figure this out for sure, but I suspect that this song was written after Troilokanath Shannal, the composer, met Sri Ramakrishna. And that, because you'll find in the gospel in many places that Sri Ramakrishna is always encouraging people on their path, but then always encouraging them not to be fanatical, not to be one-sided. In the case of followers of the Brahma Samaj, he would say, wonderful that you believe in God without form, the personal God without form. But never for a moment say that God with form is untrue. How can you say that? You have no basis for saying it, so be broad-minded. So he would, and to Advaita Vedantins, he would say, never put down bhakti, never say that God can't also be personal. To Vaishnavas, he would say, don't put down Shaktas, worshippers of Kali, and vice versa. You see, so he's always he would encourage people on their path and then remind them, don't be fanatical, don't be one-sided. And so it's possible, depending on what year this song was composed, I think it's probably likely, that he wrote this song under the influence of Sri Ramakrishna, because one thing I looked up Troilokanath Shannal's just a little biography, and it appears that almost all of his songs have these two different influences. On the one hand, the Brahmo ideology, which is this formless but personal God, and on the other hand, Vaishnavism. And Vaishnavism, of course, is very strongly, it very strongly emphasizes the personal God, with form, right, Krishna. So that's a little bit of background. Now, regarding the translation of the song, I actually think it's a wonderful translation. And you might not be surprised to find out that Nikhilanji enlisted the help of a very accomplished American poet to translate not just this song, but I think all of the songs in the gospel. John Moffat, an American poet. And as poetry, it's wonderful. The only problem is it's a song. And as I said, it's not possible to translate songs from one language to another. So I'm not criticizing the translation. I'm saying that it's actually that these Bengali songs are actually untranslatable. And so that's why I'm not going to give a better translation, because I could never give a better translation than this. And yet I still maintain that this song and all the other songs in the gospel are untranslatable. And I wanted to dwell a little bit on the song and analyze it a little bit. But before I do, I wanted to ask another question to you guys. Sri Ramakrishna is in a state of samadhi. What kind of samadhi?
Bhava.
Yeah, what do you mean by bhava?
Because he's
he's looking at something, he's smiling at something, he's halfway in between, it seems like.
Yeah, very good.
This is most frequent samadhi probably.
Yeah, I think that later in the Gospel we'll find, he says on a number of occasions, he distinguishes two basic types of samadhi, okay? One he calls jada samadhi, or nirvikalpa samadhi. Jada means literally like you're a stone, completely stuck still and as if you're not sentient. Jada samadhi. And he says, it's like when a salt doll goes to measure the depths of the ocean. The moment it sets foot in the ocean, it melts into the ocean. That's the state of Advaitic Brahmagyana, non-dual knowledge of Brahman, or knowledge of non-dual Brahman. And then he says, there's another kind of samadhi, which he calls, the term you use is bhava samadhi. That's one term he uses. There's another term he uses. Does anyone know the other term he uses? This is getting harder. No. Thanks for mentioning that, actually, because Kenny here mentions sahaja samadhi. And that's actually significant in relation to the Gita shloka, because I think one can see Sri Krishna's answer to Arjuna. Arjuna wants all the external characteristics of somebody in the state of samadhi. Krishna says, you're barking up the wrong tree. All the characteristics of a person in samadhi are internal. That lends itself to a sahaja samadhi kind of reading. You don't need to be stock still like a stone. You don't need to be in a state of trance in that sense. You could be literally, talking to other people, teaching a class, and still be in samadhi. That's sahaja means natural samadhi. But thank you for mentioning that. So that's another kind of samadhi, sahaja samadhi. Sahaja samadhi means you go about your daily life, but you can be in the state of samadhi the whole time. Many people thought Ramana Maharshi is in the state of sahaja samadhi in that way. Holy Mother is a wonderful example from our tradition of somebody in the state of sahaja samadhi. Where Sri Ramakrishna, when he goes into states of samadhi, usually he loses external consciousness. In the case of both the bhakti form of samadhi and the advaitic form of samadhi, of course there are exceptions. And the thing is, how do we know he's not in a state of sahaja samadhi in other times? So he probably was, right? So it's not that. But the thing is, what's also striking about him is that he would often go into these states of samadhi where he would lose external consciousness. Okay, so the other term he uses to refer to bhava samadhi, which is this bhakti-oriented samadhi, is chetana samadhi. He mentions it later in the Gospel. So there are two terms he uses. Bhava samadhi or chetana samadhi. This is a bhakti-oriented samadhi. Why do I say bhakti-oriented? Because you're seeing a form of God. Even if you're not seeing a form of God, you're at least having some kind of ecstatic realization of the personal God. It could be formless but personal, but in this case it's very clearly with form and personal, right? So that's why I think you're right, Nish, that the state of samadhi that he's in is a bhava or chetana samadhi, as opposed to an advaitic nirvikalpa samadhi. Because in the state of nirvikalpa samadhi, there's no subject and object. So there's no question of a bhakta, a devotee, realizing the personal God. Because there's neither bhakta nor personal God in the state of advaitic knowledge. It's like that salt doll in the ocean, merging in the ocean. Okay? So that's the first thing I wanted to mention. Now, regarding the song, let me read to you the original Bengali. Chintayo mamo mano shohori chidghano niranjano kiba anupama bhati mohono muroti bhakoto hridaya ranjano নবরাগে রঞ্জিত কোটি শশী বিনিন্দিত কিবা বিজলি চমকে সে রূপ আলোকে পুলকে শিহরে জীবন. So I'll pause there because actually M he quotes the first few lyrics and then explains how the master Sri Ramakrishna is responding, and then he gives the further lines. So let me pause there. And let me explain to you a little bit in more detail why I think that this song and all the other songs in the gospel are strictly untranslatable. What's happening is, as I said, the poetry is very beautiful in translation. Meditate, O my mind, on the Lord Hari, the stainless one, pure spirit through and through, for instance. Now, the thing is, that's two long lines of English poetry, okay, in translation. And the original Bengali is Chintayo mamo manaso hori chidghano niranjano. And it goes on. I'll spare you the rest of the song because I'm a very bad singer. But the stainless one is Niranjana. It's one word, Niranjana. And then you get Chidghana. The translation, pure spirit through and through. So they're tiny little words in Bengali which are being rendered as long phrases. Of course, the rhyme schemes, there's not going to be any rhyming. All that's gone. The tune is gone. And so for all these reasons, you're really getting something very different from what the original is. I feel like maybe it already exists, but if it doesn't, somebody out there should do this. Online, one should have a kind of online version of the gospel where every time you come across a song, in whatever language, you can just click on it as a hypertext, and you can listen to the original Bengali song. That would be wonderful, so that you get a taste of what Sri Ramakrishna actually heard and what launched him into the state of Samadhi. The other thing is, I'm not going to go into every little quibble I have with the translation, but in the translation there's a line, "How dear is he to all his devotees?" And the original Bengali there is Bhakoto Hridaya Ranjana. Bhakoto Hridaya Ranjana. Hridaya in Sanskrit means heart. That's not in the translation at all. Bhakata means bhakta. Bhakta Hridaya Ranjana. Delight or joy. So God is a delight or joy, or the joy welling up in the heart of the bhakta, something like that, I think would be more accurate. And it's significant, because remember one thing I mentioned about this being a literary masterpiece, this entire section, one of the reasons is we're going to find M making these point-to-point, he's using words from the song and explaining Sri Ramakrishna's external characteristics using those words. And one of them that will come up 3 times at the very end of this section is Hridaya in Bengali. Hridaya, heart. And so unless there's no way that somebody who doesn't know Bengali will know that in the song that heart is mentioned here. Okay. Okay, and the other thing, so I'll give you another example of that, this kind of point-to-point mapping. In the last line that I read, like lightning gleams the glory of his form, raising erect the hair for very joy. I think it's a good translation, but then M says, the master shuddered when this last line was sung. What's the word for shuddered here? Shihorite, which is the word used at the end of, like literally just before M says that. Because let me read you the Bengali again. Puloke, enjoy, shihore jibon. The body, the hairs of the body stand up on end, right, in the state of Samadhi. It's called horripilation. It's a very ugly sounding word in English, but that's what it means. When the hairs stand on end, it's horripilation. So that's what this word shihore means. Enjoy, the body is in a state of horripilation. Very next sentence. Ganer ei choronti gahibar shomoy Thakur Sri Ramakrishna shihorite lagilen. Shihora shihorite. Very next line, completely occluded by the translation. And there's no way to avoid that. I mean, because, as I said, I'm not saying that I could have done a better job here. I think it's impossible. And it goes on like that. And I'll point out a few more instances where he's using exact words from the song to point out Sri Ramakrishna's own state of Samadhi. Okay, another translation issue. I'll read the English, that sentence again first. Now and then, his lips, meaning Sri Ramakrishna's lips, parted in a smile. Here, the Bangla is, Maje maje jeno ki dekhiya hashitechen. Anyone, even if you don't know Bangla, anyone who knows a little bit of Bangla? I'll say it again. Yeah, maje maje means, I taught you the other day what maje maje means. Kabhi kabhi in Hindi. So now and then. Jeno ki dekhiya hashitechen. Jeno ki dekhiya hashitechen. Hashitechen means he has a smile. Jeno ki dekhiya, as if seeing something, he starts smiling. That's missing from the English. Now and then his lips parted in a smile. No hint that he's seeing something. And I think it's extremely significant, especially in the context of a state of samadhi and bhava samadhi, where you're supposed to be seeing a form of God. This should really be mentioned, I think. Now and then, his lips parted in a smile, as if he was seeing something, or something along those lines. Whoa. And then, of course, in the next line in the translation, it does say, so was he seeing the peerless beauty of God that shames the splendor of a million moons? Na jani koti shoshi binindito ki anupam rup darshan koritechen. So that's accurate, but why not also translate the ki dekhiya in the previous sentence, that he's actually smiling as a result of a vision, seeing some divine form. Again, next question in the English translation. Was this the vision of God, the essence of spirit? Here again, what he's doing is directly using a word in the original song, but that's occluded by the translation. Eri naam ki bhagavane chinmoy roop darshan. Chinmoy roop darshan. Here, well, hold on. Chinmoy Rup Darshan. Yeah, well, it comes later. So Chidananda Rashe and this. So it's not, okay, it's not an exact, he's not using a word for word thing, but I think he's thinking very directly about the song here as well. And you might miss that in translation when you see the essence of spirit. Okay. Okay, another thing. Okay, let me reread the next three lines of the song and then read the Bengali. Worship his feet in the lotus of your heart, with mind serene and eyes made radiant with heavenly love. Behold that matchless sight. That matchless sight, so Hridi Kamalashane Bhajo Tar Charan, Dekho Shantomone Prem Noyone, Aparupo Priyo Darshan. Aparupo Priyo Darshan. Behold that matchless sight. Matchless sight here is rendering Aparupo Priyo Darshan. Okay. Aparupa is, I think, accurately translated as matchless, inimitable. I mean, there's nothing like it in the world, incomparable. Priyo Darshan. This is difficult to translate, but it's like a loving vision of this incomparable, beautiful divine form. Then M says, Abar shei bhuvana mohan hasyo, shorir sheirup nishpando. Okay, again, that bewitching smile. See, bhuvana mohana hasyo, world bewitching smile, that also is a reference to the song, because mohana muruti in the song, in the second line of the song, that the form of God is mohana muruti, is bewitching in its beauty, in its splendor, in its effulgence. Yeah, Kenny?
I think it's really interesting that Sri Ramakrishna is mirroring what's going on in the song. He's a bewitching, matchless beauty.
Exactly.
And
yeah.
like the song in here, like, what's the difference?
Do we have a mic so that people online can also hear? Yeah, so go ahead and use it. Yeah, say it again briefly. Yeah.
It's really interesting how Sri Ramakrishna is mirroring what's happening in the song. His matchless beauty is matching the song's matchless beauty.
Yeah, well, he's also transfixed by the matchless beauty of God in the state of samadhi, right? Yeah. And as I said, it's very easy to miss those correspondences if you don't know the original, if you're not reading the original Bengali.
So for M, he's the one through whose mind we're seeing this, and it must have been just something amazing.
Oh, I mean, yeah, no doubt. Yeah, exactly. Okay, so bewitching, another word, which is taken directly from the song, Mohana Muruti. Here it's Bhuvana Mohana Hasyo. The smile is bewitching. Sheirup Nishpando. Okay, the body motionless as before. The eyes half shut, as if beholding a strange inner vision. Here I strongly object. This is the only place where I think this is a really strange. He's throwing in the word strange here. It's just not in the original Bengali. And it really changes the mood and the tone of the whole vision, it seems to me. Why strange? It makes it seem as if it's some kind of weird or grotesque vision of God, but strange is not mentioned at all. And let me just mention what is actually said in the original. Ar shei oporupo rupo darshan koriya jeno Mahendranath bhashitechen. Well, actually, there are two different sentences here. I mean, it's really a kind of a rough translation in Nikhilanandaji. Kintu ki jeno oporup rup darshan koritechen. Ar shei oporup rup darshan koriya jeno Mahendranath bhashitechen. He's repeating the phrase oporupa darshana twice, which comes directly from the song. Again, missed by anybody who doesn't know, who's not reading the original Bengali. Aparupa Priyodarshan is the original word from the song, the words from the song. M is very deliberately, consciously referring to Sri Ramakrishna's own state of samadhi using the same language. And Nikhilanandaji, as if beholding a strange inner vision, and this even stranger thing to me, what's strange to me is he chooses to translate Aparupa Priyadarshan in the song as that matchless sight. There's no strangeness there. So why does he insert strange here when it's the same word? M is using the same word. Is this too complicated for people who don't know? I mean, okay.
Strange.
I think strange can also have not just weird connotations, just unusual. It could be almost as if it's unusual. So maybe that's what he was referring to.
I still think it's not the right connotation for this vision.
Well, it does give you sort of negative
little negative
ideas.
Connotations, and Aparupa has absolutely no whiff of anything negative. It means it's matchless. I mean, I'm using Nikhilanandaji's own word, matchless. I just think that he's just stuck to his own translation.
That sentence is a correct translation to that. Not the strange, the matchless. That's what he's saying.
I like Nikhilanandaji's translation of Aparupa Priyadarshan in the song itself as that matchless sight.
Okay.
I mean, it's far better than strange inner vision. Yeah, and I just think he could have just stuck with that, and then that would have also made clear that M is using the same word to describe Sri Ramakrishna's own state. And instead he's adding this word strange, which strikes me as strange.
He's adding something about like his own perception of
Whose own?
M's own perception of
Yeah, but M doesn't say it, so who are we to... I mean, I think we should follow M as much as possible.
Okay,
That's
the poet is inserting that to make it an actual poem.
no.
Translation.
Well, Nikhilanandaji.
That's what I mean.
He's not the poet, but he took the help of an American poet, John Moffat.
Right.
I don't know why he did it, and I don't think there's any point in really speculating about why he added strange. I don't even think, but in any case, these are just the small places where I would respectfully differ from Nikhilanandaji. I don't think that there's any hint in M's description of Sri Ramakrishna's state of samadhi that it was a strange vision. That's all. It was certainly a matchless sight, which is, again, Nikhilanandaji's language. I just think he should have stuck with that phrase. Now, I mentioned that the word heart comes up again and again toward the end. I think that's highly significant. Let me just emphasize, let's discuss that now. So let me reread the English and then go to the Bengali. Oh, let me read the last couple lines of the Bengali song first. I'll reread the English first. Caught in the spell of his love's ecstasy, immerse yourself forevermore, O mind, in him who is pure knowledge and pure bliss. Chidananda roshe bhakti yoga beshe ho re chiromogono. Chidananda roshe hai re premananda roshe. Then, as I said, so I'm not gonna quibble with the translation here. As I said, the song is untranslatable. But let me. The relevant part here is after that. M is speaking now. The sight of the samadhi and the divine bliss he had witnessed left an indelible impression on M's mind. He returned home deeply moved. Now and then he could hear within himself the echo of the soul-intoxicating lines. Immerse yourself forevermore, O mind, in him who is pure knowledge and pure bliss. Here, the Bengali, সমাধির ও প্রেমানন্দের এই অদ্ভুত ছবি হৃদয় মধ্যে গ্রহণ করিয়া মাস্টার গৃহে প্রত্যাবর্তন করিতে লাগিলেন. First sentence, right? Here, Nikhilanandaji is saying, the sight of the samadhi and the divine bliss he had witnessed left an indelible impression on M's mind. But the word is hriday, heart. And that's significant because the word heart appears twice in the song, and he's clearly again echoing the song, the language of the song. Okay, then, he returned home deeply moved. Now and then, he could hear within himself the echo of those soul-intoxicating lines. Maje maje, hridoy moddhe, again hridoy. Now and then, in his heart, Shei hridoy unmottokari. Again, hridoy. In 2 lines, he repeats the word heart 3 times to emphasize the connection with the song. Maje maje hridoy moddhe shei hridoy unmottokari modhur songiteer foot uthite lagilo. Premanando rashe hore chiromogono hori preme motto hoye. So I think it's absolutely essential to appreciating what M is saying and also the literary value and dimension of this entire section. To register heart here, and Niklaji doesn't use the word heart even once, even though M uses it 3 times. And as I said, in the song itself, the word hridoy is used twice. Bhakoto hridoya ranjana, as I already mentioned, and then it comes again. Worship his feet in the lotus of your heart. So he's clearly thinking of the song here too, up till the very end of the section. Okay. And finally, I just wanted to say something about, and I'd like to hear from you as well about this. Why is this so significant for us as spiritual aspirants reading the gospel? When we read these incidents of Sri Ramakrishna listening to a devotional song and then going into these very high states of Samadhi, how is it relevant to us? I mean, one sort of cynical interpretation or approach would be to say that, well, that's him because he was a saint, but where does that leave the rest of us? We don't go into Samadhi when we're listening to songs, at least most of us don't. So where does that leave us?
It shows it's possible by devotion.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I mean, what this person in the audience just said, Premdas, is that he's setting an example for everyone else, setting the kind of ideal. He's showing that it's possible for even us. I think we can think of him as the ideal listener to spiritual music, and he sets the standard, and then we can strive to attain that ideal. And this reminds me, I studied poetry in a previous life. I mean, in this life, but in my pre-monastic life. And my favorite poet was T.S. Eliot. I assume most of you have read at least something of T.S. Eliot's. But one of my favorite poems is after he went through a spiritual journey himself, actually, and studied the Gita, studied Sanskrit at Harvard. And after he converted, he was very skeptical and agnostic for a while. Then he was interested in Buddhism, then Vedanta. But he finally took up Catholicism, and he was a Catholic. And after he became Catholic, his poetry completely changed in tone. And he wrote these beautiful 4 poems toward the end of his life, called 4 quartets. And one of them is called Dry Salvages. And there, he talks about listening to music as a very profound spiritual experience. I'll just read you the lines. He says, music heard so deeply that it is not heard at all, but you are the music while the music lasts. Music heard so deeply that it is not heard at all, but you are the music while the music lasts. And I think this perfectly captures Sri Ramakrishna. He's lost external consciousness at this point, so he's not listening to the song in that sense. Because he's perfectly one with the music, with the consciousness of the singer. And M, in the original Bengali, is able to capture that identity between Sri Ramakrishna and the consciousness of the singer so beautifully and so elegantly. And that's part of the reason why I think that this section is untranslatable. They've done their best. Niklanji and with the able aid of John Moffat have done their best, and I can't better it. But this is yet one more reason why you should try to learn Bengali. I already gave one reason on Sunday, which is I gave a Sunday talk which some of you attended on Sri Ramakrishna's jokes, and I was saying that to appreciate Sri Ramakrishna's jokes in the gospel, you've got to know Bengali, because no joke is translatable from one language to another. You might get the punchline or sort of 20% of the humor, but 80% of the humor is in the word choice, every single word, the pacing. Yeah, so all those things. Somebody had their hand up.
Oh,
yeah, Hannah.
Is it untranslatable or unexplainable? I feel like
Well, but it's unexplainable in Bengal. Oh, give her the mic and you can, say.
Oh, I was asking if it was untranslatable or unexplainable. If the realities of being with a holy person can ever be conveyed in words, and I feel like M often falls short. I mean, I'm not reading it in the original Bengal, but I still feel like that's also a pressing question.
Yeah, no, I think that's a nice point. I mean, spiritual experiences, of course, are inexplicable at some level, right? Words can only convey so much. That's true. But still, what are the words that are that are trying to convey that spiritual experience? Even that's being distorted. As I said, not because there are deep faults in the translation, but because it's not possible to translate songs from one language to another. That's all. So I agree with you, except that I still think that there are many places in the gospel where I'd say, yes, you can translate it and you get the basic idea. But here in this kind of section, I really think much of the beauty and power of the section is lost if you don't read the original. Yeah. Oh, didn't you have? Oh, okay. You don't have a question. Okay. Anyone else have any questions? So I'll open it up to questions at this point. Anyone? And online? Okay, well, last time I asked you got flustered. So I can try to look it up myself. My concern is I'll start hearing myself, and then I might explode. How do I go? Okay, no questions?
You said you were asking a question.
Well, give her the mic, please.
Oh, I just don't want to. What was the question that you asked?
Oh, no, just does anybody have any questions or comments about?
That.
Oh, the question was like, what is the significance of like this description of what Tucker is experiencing for us?
Yeah. Oh, because he did ask a question. Okay.
Oh, I see. Oh, there it is. I found the live one. Okay, so hold on. Okay, see, so it gets weird when you start hearing yourself. So okay, so let's see. How do I do the live feed though? Live chat 40. Oh yeah, there we go. Okay. Okay, Rajendra Parikh is asking, how is formlessness? I'm going to edit the English just so. Okay, how is formlessness compatible with the personal God? Are they not contradictory terms? That's a very good question, and this should remind us of the question asked by M in his first visit, or I think second visit, to Sri Ramakrishna. And Sri Ramakrishna is telling M, always remember that God is both with form and without form, and M is thinking, how is that possible? It's crazy. Milk is either white or black, but it can't be both white and black. That's a contradiction. And so Rajendra is asking a good question here. How are they compatible? Well, Sri Ramakrishna, in his own inimitable, matchless way, he gives analogies to convey these very lofty spiritual teachings. One of my favorites is this infinite ocean of Satchitananda. Imagine that to be the formless, absolute, formless Satchitananda. Then what happens? Under the cooling influence of bhakti, imagine this wind or breeze of bhakti blowing. What happens? That water from the ocean forms into different forms of ice. Each of those forms of ice corresponds to different forms of the personal God. So, does anyone ask, isn't it contradictory for the ocean to be liquid and ice at the same time? And then you're like, no, because they're icebergs. That's how the Titanic sank. So, then I can finish this the story because I always enjoy telling this. Okay, how does this parable proceed? Not parable. What would we call it? Metaphor. Yeah. With the rising of the sun of knowledge, what happens?
Melts.
The ice forms melt. Yeah. Now the followers of Shankara are very pleased. They're saying vindicated. Forms of ice melt. They're not ultimately real. The forms of God, unreal at the end of the day. When the sun of knowledge rises, what? That means when you have knowledge of God, then, or not God, they'd say Brahman, then the forms of ice melt. Then Sri Ramakrishna says, but in some places the ice doesn't melt at all. They become like quartz, or they become quartz, really is what he says. Nitto Shakar, they're eternal forms of God. And he repeats this in many places in the Gospel. We'll find that as we proceed in the Gospel. Okay, so the forms of God are 100% real. Never think along the lines of Shankara school that these states of bhava samadhi or chetana samadhi, these bhakti-oriented states of samadhi, are lower than nirvikalpa samadhi. Sri Ramakrishna never talks about a hierarchy between Advaitic samadhi and bhakti states of samadhi. And why? Because ontologically, Brahman and Shakti are inseparable. Shakti is as real as the impersonal absolute, as Brahman. Because of that, the experience of the personal God is going to be as genuine, as great, as the experience of non-dual Brahman. You see, so that's extremely important to keep in mind. So that's my answer to Rajendra's question. Ram Shane asks, question to Maharaj, can you please write a book? Oh, I love it when people recommend that I write books. I'm being sarcastic. So, the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, missing translations or something like that. Even in past discourses, you have pointed to similar discrepancies. That kind of title is unnecessarily provocative, and I would never write a book called Missing Translations or anything like that. But my own opinion is that Niklayanji wrote this extraordinary translation almost a century ago. And it's phenomenal. I mean, it's just really incredible. I agree with about 95%, maybe, roughly, of the translation, and I think that 5% of it can be improved. And so better than coming out with a different book would be to just update the translation, revise it a little bit. Noting that this is not the original, but that in certain places we're trying to bring it closer to the original Bengali. That's possible, but all up to Sri Ramakrishna and our holy order. Okay. Okay. Oh, and then Ram Shane just immediately gives a retort to what I just said. I feel Maharaj is being unnecessarily reverential to original authors. Maharaj clearly points out important discrepancies and simultaneously says he cannot do better. Okay. Well, I'm being nice. But no, I'm not saying it can't do better. I said that I agree with 95% of his translation, disagree with 5%. So, all right. So, these are rough figures. Okay. There's another one who says, this is Bhashyati Shamanto. Pranams, I would respectfully like to suggest that the word Niranjano in the song is probably being used as a verb and not as a noun. So Hari delights the heart of the bhakta actively, not merely, and then it cuts off. Oh, not merely a delight through his presence. Oh, that's nice actually. Bhagato Hridaya Ranjana. Oh, I see. That's nice. I agree. That's good. So like he who delights the heart of the bhakta. That's nice. Thank you, Bhashyati, for that. And thank you, because that reminds me, I wanted to talk about another line from the song, because it's the one line that completely befuddled me, and maybe Bhashyati or someone else can help me with this. Here's a line. Ever, in translation first, then I'll give you the Bengali. Ever more beauteous in fresh blossoming love. Who's being referred to here? Let me read. Yeah, God. Right? And there are all these attributes of God, the stainless one, pure spirit through and through. How peerless is the light that in him shines. How soul bewitching is his wondrous form. How dear is he to all his devotees. Ever more beauteous in fresh blossoming love that shames the splendor of a million moons. So this is clearly he's describing God. Now, let me read you the Bengali. It's one little phrase. Naborage Ranjito. The same Ranjana that Bhashyati is talking about. Again, you get the same similar word. Naborage Ranjito. Navaraga. Navaraga means a new state of love or bhakti. Ranjito. Here, this is difficult to translate really, but like colored by might be literal, but it's like suffused with this newfound bhakti. So now I asked, I'm not naming names here, but I asked a Bengali native speaker this a few hours ago, and I asked him how he might interpret this phrase, and he thought for a long time, 5 to 10 minutes actually, thinking about different, and then saying, he's saying that he respectfully disagrees with Niklayanji's translation because he feels that, and because I stumbled on this line myself, the reason being that what does it mean for God to be in a new state of bhakti or love, whatever this raga is? It seemed to me that the line applies better to the mind of the devotee. The song is addressed to the mind of, right, it starts, meditate, O my mind, on the Lord Hari. Then goes into attributes about God, the stainless one, pure spirit through and through. Now, Nikhilanji and John Moffat choose to translate this line, Noborage Runjito, as referring to God, ever more beauteous in fresh blossoming love. And I think that's possible, but I was glad that this Bengali native speaker agrees with me that he thinks that it means something like, and after seeing, or even at least thinking, contemplating God in his beauteous form, with that newfound bhakti, then you can proceed as follows, right? It's us that through listening to this kind of music, by contemplating God's wondrous, matchless form, who develops this newfound bhakti. And he's telling me that both are grammatically possible. I understand the logic of Nikhilanji translating it as an attribute of God. Why? Because it's a whole list of other attributes of God, and it's in the middle. Before that line is attributes of God. How soul-bewitching is his wondrous form? How dear is he to all his devotees? Right? So in that, along those lines, Nikhilanji says, well, this also should be an attribute of God. I think that was probably Nikhilanji's logic. But this Bengali native speaker says that it could easily also, it could be taken to refer to the O my mind, meditate O my mind on the Lord Hari. So it could be the mind of the bhakta, the devotee, who is experiencing this newfound love. Okay. Other questions. Okay. Jill. Question. Are the eternal quartz-like forms of God retained when, during cycles, all goes into seed form? In what way do they exist in seed form? It's an interesting question. So the thing is, all these transcendental lokas, where bhaktas, liberated bhaktas, dwell with the personal God, whether that's conceived as Goloka or Ramakrishna Loka or any of the other Christian heaven, Islamic heaven, Jannah, these are not part of this physical universe. So the question, Jill is referring to the fact that right now we're in this manifest state of the universe, eventually big crunch. And according to Hinduism, because the Hindus believe in a cyclical theory of creation, big crunch means the whole universe contracts into a seed form, bija avastha. And she's asking, well, if the whole universe contracts into the bija avastha, then all those, the personal God and the heavens will also contract. No, because it's not part of those. It's not part of this physical universe. It's beyond. It's these are transcendental lokas. So they remain eternally, completely independently of this play of this world. Okay. Okay. Ram Shen is just politely saying, okay, 5% book without provocative title. So he's being obliging. Okay. Some people like to fight with me, but he's, or he or she, I'm not sure what Ram, R-A-U-M. Okay. Shudhir. In the Song of the Sannyasin, Swami Vivekananda says, whomsoever wears a form wears a chain. Isn't he not making a case for the formless God? Good question. That's a tricky question. Possibly. It depends on the whomsoever, what he's thinking of. I mean, the thing is he including God there? Or is he thinking of us in the form of these human bodies, especially karmically generated bodies, seems to me. So it's a good question. I don't want to be dogmatic about it. But I don't think that the context of the poem, Song of the Sannyasin, justifies taking the form to include God's form. But you can argue with me about that. The other thing is, if we do take it that way, as referring to God, we end up committing ourselves to the view that Swami Vivekananda differs from his guru on this very important point. And while it's possible that he does, I think we need to make sure that we have sufficient evidence to justify that kind of deviation. Nicole. I'm getting lots of questions now that they see I'm responding to them. So they're getting excited. Okay, so Nicole Narayani asks, Swamiji, and I'm mentioning their names, so they get their little second of fame. Okay, Swamiji, I believe our souls are real beings. Illusion is only ego identity. Truth is realizing self as Jivatman, who is by default one with Brahman. This is where reality begins. Okay, I don't think there's a question there. It starts with a question mark, but I don't see a question. Truth is realizing self as Jivatman, who's by default one with Brahman. Okay, well, she seems like she might be a follower of Shankara or something, and so she's saying that the truth is realizing that you're one with Brahman. And I would just respond by saying that I think Sri Ramakrishna respectfully disagrees with Nicole. And Sri Ramakrishna says, bhaktas like to eat sugar rather than become sugar. And that eating sugar is no less a state of salvation, of liberation, than becoming sugar. Both are on a salvific par. Jill is following up. More specifically, how are the eternal quartz-like forms different, if they are, when in seed form? Are the devotees still tasting the sugar of the divine with form when all is in seed form? Did you not listen to what I just said in response to your previous question? So, because my whole point is that the forms of the personal God don't go into any kind of, retract into any kind of seed state. Because the forms of the personal God dwell in a higher transcendental loka, which is completely untouched by this creation.
In the Tattva map of the Kala Trika Tantra, there's Maya. Above that, there's this...
Can you give him the mic, please, whoever has it, just so that other people can hear?
Yeah, because the 25 tattvas of Sankhya, Kashmir Shaivism adds 11 on top. Right. 5 are attributed to Maya. So when diagrammatically represented as Maya, and then everything below it would be like this universe that has Avyakta and all that. But above that is the Shuddha Advan, this pure realm, where all these, so they're above Maya and therefore not
absolutely.
subject.
So I mean, we've got a Kashmir Shaivism expert here, and he's talking about the 36 tattvas. And the lokas, the realms in which the personal God resides, are all transcendental, completely beyond those tattvas. Sri Ramakrishna uses not 36 tattvas, but how many tattvas? Come on, some of you should know this. Yeah, 24. Wow, look at that. Can he just look at that? 24 tattvas, exactly. Choturbingsha tattva. Brahman has become the 24 cosmic principles. And again, Sri Ramakrishna will say all of those transcendental lokas beyond the 24 tattvas. Okay. So thank you, that's helpful. Kullan Chakraborty. Nikhilananji had a different target audience, and Ramakrishna Bhavdhara was much less known, so he had to tailor the translation for that time. I think you're absolutely right. I think that he was addressing like a mid-20th century, primarily Christian audience, who's going to be, some of the stuff that's being said in the gospel would be outright or downright, troubling or, misinterpreted possibly. And so I think that's part of the reason why he translated God as he throughout the gospel rather than she. Because to the Christian ear, God is she. What is that? Because it would be too weird for them. So I think that's true. But I think that there are places where it could be a little bit more accurate. So, apart from the question of audience. Okay, so thank you. I think anyone else live? Any live questions now?
Will you sing us a song? Yes.
No, I'm terrible at saying, but I do appreciate. Huh? Oh yeah, well she could.
I could, but I don't know this one by heart.
Yeah, but the lyrics are well, but you don't read Bengali, do you? No.
Not well.
You can try.
Pull it up.
We love you, so it'll still sound good to us.
Oh no, I can't. I mean, I'm terrible, but I don't want to ruin the mood for everyone.
I have a question.
So, What?
A question about classical music.
Yes. Yes, please.
So we were talking in that talk some time ago about the more exalted, refined forms of art that are more sattvic and that they take a little more culture. You have to earn the enjoyment, right? Yeah. Comparing classical music to like some kind of sugary pop, one dichotomy I find is that the classical music, it's exalted in the sense that it's a bit complex. It's refined. You don't get it immediately. Whereas pop music, it's made such that anybody can consume it. It's very simple, 3 chords, etc. Right? Now, spiritual music, it's got that bhav, which is very hard to feel. But often it's quite simple. It's like a folk song. So I'm wondering, is it possible for someone to compose like very elevated jazz, sophisticated classical music, and have that be like incredibly hedonistic and materialistic, and someone else compose like a folk song? So it's not about the complexity of the form, but rather the bhav behind it.
Oh, I 100% agree. I mean, I listen to KUSC a lot, which is like the USC classical music station. And boy, it's really hit or miss, for me at least. Because sometimes they're playing sublime, choral music from Bach or Mozart, and then other times it's this awful Harry Potter theme song. No offense to anybody who loves the Harry Potter classical musical theme song. But like it goes back and forth, and it's all classical music, but some of it strikes me as tremendously worldly.
Yeah.
there aren't words, right? But the instruments convey just rajas. I mean, it's just agitation. The same kind of emotions that you find in a Taylor Swift song are just transposed into instruments. And so, yeah, I think it has far more to do with the bhava, the inner attitude, the spiritual attitude behind the song.
I would say not just with the song, but also with the artist who's interpreting it.
Oh, yeah, certainly. I mean, there are different interpretations, and there are better and worse interpretations of songs. Ram Prasad songs, which were Sri Ramakrishna's favorites, there have been hundreds of people singing his songs. And my favorite, at least among the ones I've heard, is Pannalal Bhattacharya. Incredibly simple voice, extremely sattvic, absolutely no frills. And there are other people, speaking of like these sophisticated, complex classical musicians, sometimes they just have it's like they're showing off their own virtuosity rather than actually conveying the inner bhava of the song, of the singer and the song. It's more about trumpeting their own, look at how great I am, look at how high a note I can reach for this sustained period of time, and they do those, especially in Indian classical music, they have all these, it gets really, so I think that's right. Did I answer the question? Yeah, thank you. Okay. Anyone else?
I've got a follow-up too.
Yeah, please, go ahead. Mike again?
I'm thinking of an incident of Raja Maharaj when he was hearing someone tuning or playing scales, warming up. He went into Samadhi also. And I think someone near him pointed out, but that's not a song, they're just tuning. And he said, that's the Shabda Brahman, the Nada Brahman. So I'm wondering about, there are these spiritual songs. Clearly that's the bhava of the song. But what about sound itself?
Yeah.
I wonder if there are any instances in which Ramakrishna, like Raja Maharaj, is just going into Samadhi.
Well, the thing is, forget even about sound. He sees a white boy leaning against a tree. And he sees Krishna, Tribhanga Krishna, which means Krishna bent in three places, and he goes into Samadhi. He's taken to a zoo because he was childlike in nature. So they take him to the zoo. The first exhibit he sees is what? The lion in a cage. He sees that as a lion, which is the vehicle of Durga, goes into Samadhi, and then he says himself in the Gospel, I couldn't see the rest of the zoo animals. So, I mean, huh?
The umbrella.
Umbrella, yeah.
The mundane one.
The sound of the umbrella.
No, seeing the umbrella being retracted.
Oh.
What's that one?
Oh, well, yeah, but he doesn't go into Samadhi. He extracts a spiritual teaching from it, right, as far as I remember. He says that it's like the mind withdrawing from external objects, and as far as I remember. But anyway, Preeti here is suggesting that she also feels that there's an incident when an umbrella is contracted and Sri Ramakrishna goes into Samadhi. My recollection is that he doesn't go into Samadhi, but he uses it as an analogy for, I think he sees it, and then he says, it's just like when the mind, kuriya, something like you're withdrawing the mind from everything external and focusing completely on God. So yeah, Sri Ramakrishna, if your mind is as pure and as full of devotion and love as his was, you don't even need sound. It's just literally, his struggle was keeping the mind down to the relative plane. Our struggle is bringing it up, right? So that's why when he would come down from states of Samadhi, or when he was having trouble coming down, what would he say? He would say, Ami jal khabo. He would say things like, I want to drink some water. He's manufacturing an innocent desire in his mind so that the mind can come back down to the relative plane, because the mind is always soaring in a higher state. So I don't disagree with you. I just think it doesn't have to be a sound at all. Literally anything. Because when you see nothing but God, then because everything is God, everything you see is going to remind you of God. Right?
The reason I asked is I'm thinking both the questions together, like simplicity of music and the bhav behind it is the point.
Yeah.
I'm thinking a musician can just like play a scale or make just one sound, and in that alone, given sufficient purity, convey that bhav.
Yeah. I think it depends on us and our receptivity. Our spiritual receptivity to music. And I think that really this is a lesson for all of us, that as we listen to music, we should first of all not keep it as background music, but listen with deep concentration when we do, at least when we're serious about it. And secondly, try to identify with the bhava, the inner attitude of the singer, and one of my favorite songs, I mentioned this before, but it's very obscure. Dietrich Buxtehude, Buxtehude, who was one of the mentors of Bach, who was obviously much more famous. He put one of the Psalms to music from the Hebrew Bible, the Psalms, which are these ecstatic songs, poems addressed to God. And the whole song, it's very beautiful. It's in German, and it's, "Oh Lord, I want absolutely nothing in this world but you. And it goes on in this vein, and it's put to such beautiful music. Just listening to it, really, you can. If I were pure enough, I think I would go into samadhi. So anyway, so we should all try to the best of our ability, to emulate Sri Ramakrishna, purify our minds, and try to become one with this divine consciousness of these kinds of singers. Thank you. Any last questions? What's my favorite pop song? Wow, she's really. That's.
Obviously. Did you drink the water for that?
Yeah, well, I don't know. Favorite pop song? That's tough. Although when I was a kid, I really loved this. MC Hammer's "Can't Touch This." Yeah. Da-na-na-na. Yeah. All right. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.